Pinned post 8:39 a.m. LVIV Russian President Vladimir Putin warned that Ukrainian statehood is in jeopardy and likened the West's sanctions on Russia to declaring war, while a promised ceasefire in the port city of Mariupol collapsed amid scenes of terror in the besieged town. With the Kremlin's rhetoric growing fiercer and a reprieve from fighting dissolving, Russian troops continued to shell encircled cities, and the number of Ukrainians forced from their country grew to 1.4 million. Ukrainian troops in Sytniaky, Ukraine on Saturday. Bereft mothers mourned slain children, wounded soldiers were fitted with tourniquets, and doctors worked by the light of their mobile phones as bleakness and desperation pervaded. Putin continued to pin the blame for all of it squarely on the Ukrainian leadership and slammed their resistance to the invasion. If they continue to do what they are doing, they are calling into question the future of Ukrainian statehood, he said. And if this happens, it will be entirely on their conscience. He also hit out at Western sanctions that have crippled Russia's economy and sent the value of its currency tumbling. These sanctions that are being imposed, they are akin to declaring war, he said during a televised meeting with flight attendants from Russian airline Aeroflot. But thank God, we haven't got there yet. 10 days after Russian forces invaded, the struggle to enforce the temporary ceasefires in Mariupol and the eastern city of Volnovakha showed the fragility of efforts to stop the fighting across Ukraine. Ukrainian officials said Russian artillery fire and airstrikes had prevented residents from leaving before the agreed-to evacuations got underway. Putin accused Ukraine of sabotaging the effort. Monday peace talks. A third round of talks between Russia and Ukraine will take place on Monday, according to David Arakhamia, a member of the Ukrainian delegation. He gave no additional details, including where they would take place. Previous meetings were held in Belarus and led to the failed ceasefire agreement to create humanitarian corridors for the evacuation of children, women and older people from besieged cities, where pharmacies have run bare, hundreds of thousands face food and water shortages, and the injured have been succumbing to their wounds. In comments carried on Ukrainian television, Mariupol Mayor Vadim Boychenko said thousands of residents had gathered for safe passage out of the city when shelling began Saturday. We value the life of every inhabitant of Mariupol, and we cannot risk it, so we stopped the evacuation, he said. The West has broadly backed Ukraine, offering aid and weapons and slapping Russia with vast sanctions. But the fight itself has been left to Ukrainians, who have expressed a mixture of courageous resolve and despondency. Ukraine is bleeding, Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said in a video released Saturday, but Ukraine has not fallen. Advance on nuclear plant. Russian troops advanced on Saturday on a third nuclear power plant, having already taken control of 2 of the 4 operating in the country. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pleaded with American legislators for additional help even as he insisted the enemy was being defeated. We're inflicting losses on the occupants they could not see in their worst nightmare, the Ukrainian leader said. Russian troops took control of the southern port city of Kherson last week. Although they have encircled Kharkiv, Mykolaiv, Chernihiv and Sumy, Ukrainian forces have managed to keep control of key cities in central and southeastern Ukraine, Zelensky said Saturday. Diplomatic efforts continued as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Poland to meet with the Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, a day after attending a NATO meeting in Brussels, in which the alliance pledged to step up support for Eastern Flank members. In Moscow, Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett met with Putin at the Kremlin. Israel maintains good relations with both Russia and Ukraine, and Bennett has offered to act as an intermediary in the conflict, but no details of Saturday's meeting have emerged. In the wake of Western sanctions, Aeroflot, Russia's flagship state-owned airline, announced that it plans to halt all international flights except to Belarus, starting Tuesday. A vast Russian armored column threatening Ukraine's capital remained stalled outside Kiev. Ukrainian presidential advisor Oleksiy Arestovich said on Saturday afternoon that the military situation was quieter overall on Saturday, and that Russian forces hadn't taken active actions since the morning. While the shelling in Mariupol showed Russia's determination to cut Ukraine off from access to the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, further damaging the country's economy, it was Putin who was most on the offensive with his comments warning that a no-fly zone would be considered a hostile act. NATO has said it has no plans to implement such a no-fly zone, which would bar all unauthorized aircraft from flying over Ukraine. Western officials have said a main reason is a desire to not widen the war beyond Ukraine. Zelensky has pleaded for a no-fly zone over his country and lashed out at NATO for refusing to impose one, warning that all the people who die from this day forward will also die because of you.